why certain things are triggering, huh?
Oh, yeah?
To certain demographics. Yeah, but anyway, tell us your name.
And I'm Chimweka, Chileshe. Good evening to all the women as well watching us. Happy Women's Month.
They saw you do that, Jonah. Why are you pointing at me before?
Because I want to hear your name.
I'm Kapasa. Thank you for joining.
No, come on. I think let's be professional. What's your full name? Because
we're not at the back.
Tell the people your full name.
Colleagues, quite an interesting day today.
Okay, Cheswa, that's my colleague Cheswa Kapasa for people that are joining us for the first time. But, you know, before we get into all this stuff, today's the 3rd of March, meaning that Women's Month, and we have we've got a public holiday this week.
Yeah, on Saturday.
It's not Friday.
No, Saturday. So, yeah.
So it's useless...
yeah, people feel that way because, I mean... most people are off either on a Saturday. I mean, if it was a Sunday, Monday would have been a holiday, but I mean, it's a Saturday.
I mean, people can endure this one because have you noticed there's a back-to-back long weekend in April?
Yeah.
There's the Easter holiday, which has Friday and Monday as holidays. And then there's KK weekend, which is the holidays on a Monday?
It's on
28th
on
a Monday.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? So people are going to have back-to-back long weekends. But because it's Women's Month, what we're doing on Diamond TV is putting together different stories of women, young and old, who are doing exceptionally well for themselves. And our attempt is to inspire other women out there. And patience is one of the many stories that we'll be telling this month of March. So let's hear what her story is.
Hi everyone, my name is Patience Tipiri Simpungwe and I'm an electrician and a plumber. What inspired me to become an electrician and a plumber? Actually, I wasn't inspired. Growing up, I wanted to become a surgeon. But there was this one day, because of financial problems and whatnot, my sister came and told me to say they were offering scholarships at Fountain Gates. And then she said we needed to enroll, but I wasn't interested, like I said. It wasn't even my thing. So I didn't even do anything. She was there to do everything. She went and enrolled for me. She went even to look for a boarding house for me. I didn't do anything. The only time I moved a muscle was the time she said, tomorrow classes are resuming and let's go to school. I said, going to school? I leave my child. I leave my home. And then somehow I was convinced because wherever she is, I'm supposed to be. So that's how I went with her. And then in the long run, I found myself loving the course. Believe you me, when you see me right now, I love what I do. So we would face a lot of challenges, e.g. People looking down upon us, saying, you are female, you can't, and then they would come out in a funny way, like, that. And then you would try to convince them. It was so hard in the beginning, not until we began showing our skills, and then, we are here, doing the most. Did I face any stereotype or sexual harassment? I would say so far I haven't. But I've had some colleagues who would come and open up to me saying they're being harassed sexually and whatnot. But in the long run, we dealt with it the right way by reporting them to the authorities, and they took it up from there. do I manage to balance family time as well as my work? Sometimes it's difficult, I would say, because my work, in my line of work, we are required to invest more time. And then, you know, me being a mother and a wife, I need time. But somehow, I just find a way of balancing it up. And then, just like knowing what the Bible says, they say there is time for everything. So I've managed to balance up my time, being a mom, being a wife, and of course, being an electrician and a plumber. The advice that I would give to the people that would want to take up electrician and plumbing or male-dominated fields is you can do it. It's not something that it's not very difficult. It's not impossible. It's something that it's very possible. You can do it, and there's only you to prove to be you.
That's one of the many stories that we'll be telling this month of March, which is Women's Month. But
sorry, just on that. So you know when you're introducing this, you said patience is one of the stories we'll be telling. So I was thinking like, okay, that would be the message. I'm going to realize that patience is her name.
Yeah,
but it could be a double entendre. It could mean both. Yeah.
True. There's probably patience in her story.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's patience in everybody's story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also find, what happens when you have grace and mercy, how you also need to have a lot of hope.
President Hakainde Hichilema is calling on members of parliament to support delimitation.
Delimitation. Yeah. He did call on the members of parliament last week when he was addressing parliament, and he was giving progress made to the application of principles and national values. Actually, we spoke about this last week, Friday. We did speak about it, and today we're going to be speaking onto this with a member of parliament from the UPND, owing to the fact that obviously the primary members of parliament that ought to support the call from the president are those from the ruling party. And so we're going to be finding out the position of Kankoyo, member of parliament, on this particular topic. But quite a heated topic. Even the engagements that we had on Facebook when we spoke about this topic, people are divided, in terms of what they believe should be done in regards to delimitation. This has been an ongoing debate for so many years, and there hasn't been consensus, among members of parliament, those from the opposition and those from the ruling party. It's for this reason that we did, go to the X platform to ask a question and get to find out what people believe and think. So we did ask this question: should MP support the delimitation process to embrace CDF benefits? And those are the responses. 54% said yes, because this will improve CDF. 33% says no, because this is close to elections. And how many percent? 13% says not sure. The majority are supporting that we should undertake this process.
I come from, I grew up, well, I didn't actually grow up. I spent 5 years in a vast constituency. But even before that, I was in another vast constituency, which is Kabwe. And and then after that, I went to Mazabuka. Mazabuka constituency stretches from Magoe all the way to somewhere. You see that place where you get the goat meat when you're going?
Very, very famous for that, yeah.
Now, that is a huge constituency. In comparison to Lusaka, where within this district we've got 7 constituencies. And, that should demonstrate why the pace at which development is administered is very slow. Even if these constituencies in the capital city already have access to amenities that are not common in these constituencies in the outskirts. So I don't think it's a bad idea. But I think that also from the spirit of delimitation for a very long time, the reasoning has always been that it needs to happen. The reasoning has really been that it needs to happen. It's really a question of whether people feel, I don't know, I mean, I don't even get that issue of it being close to elections, because if a constituency is delimited anyway, there is going to be an election is bound to happen.
Although Andrew understands that whole concept of this being turned down on political lines, and I mean, I shared these thoughts on Friday that you can understand where the president is coming from, because he's also looking at making sure that the resources reach the constituents there, and the delimitation will happen on the basis of population and geographical reasons. So you can understand where the concerns have been, because even with the over 36 million kwacha we're talking about, as far as CDF is concerned, the debate has been, you have certain urban areas and you have rural areas, and how they get to utilize the CDF gets to be different. And issues of population size have been a concern. We've hosted members of parliament who've raised these concerns that when they visit there, sometimes it even seems like they're afraid to go to their own constituencies because there's so much they have to do there. They have to go and visit so many different wards. So you can understand where the president is coming through with this, especially with the decentralization and the councils being the ones responsible to administer the CDF. You can understand where it's coming from. But I guess the hindrance might be on political reasons, because there might be skepticism that people will lose their political influence in a certain area if they're going to divide, or it might increase the numbers of members of parliament in a certain for a certain political party or grouping. So and that's where the concern comes in, that and we'll see how the members of parliament will be reacting to this, because it's going to show who really is thinking of things from a national perspective or from a political lens.
I think that also it borders on, in as much as this program could be good for the country, I think that we cannot deny time. The time factor also comes to play. I mean, Tonse Alliance, Honorable Winda, is questioning why we should be doing this just before an election. I understand, Andrew, you're talking about how it could be something that is driven by politics. I mean, look at the NDF, look at the National Dialogue Forum, look at the Bill 10, 2019, just 2 years before the election. It was heavily criticized about getting to an election. This is, the PF is trying to sneak in certain clauses to
let's talk about how this affects,
and so on.
How does it affect the election? Make me understand.
Well, I mean, the idea there, from what the opposition are telling us, is that they feel that the ruling part would love to, because I think you heard what Honorable Luwinda said, which constituencies is going to focus on. And I think this is coming from the ZATSTATS issue where 15 wards have been left out, and there's issues around what is the ruling party going to focus on? What are they going to? Which constituencies are they going to focus on? What are they going to? So I really
think to just write a note.
So in short, maybe it's in a nutshell. Okay, maybe Andrew can explain it better.
Even when remember that the concern that the Catholic Church had around amendments to the Constitution. They said these amendments are good, but because we are near an election, we perhaps must leave them until the next election is done. There's usually, people get agitative, especially when we're touching on the Constitution when it's near an election.
I don't get it, Andrew, and the reason why I don't get it is because an election is going to happen anyway.
It's going to happen.
And look, maybe we're understanding this differently, but if we have a delimitation process, who says that an election needs to happen in those constituencies now? Because those, if new members of parliament are to come in, those new members of parliament would come in the next general election. So I don't get it. Like, I don't get why you're advancing it like this has to happen before the election, and there are new members of parliament taken to parliament
before the next general election.
The next general election.
Which general election? The 2026 general election?
It's the next general election. That's the next general election, 2026.
2026. Don't you think we're near that general election?
Isn't that the reasoning why this delimitation process should happen now, so that if there are new constituencies created and new members of parliament, they are on the ballot in 2026.
The fact of the matter is that because of politics, and that's what it really is, it's just politics, there's always, people are very sensitive about any constitutional reform. Anything is always seen to be
I get it. I get that.
An undertone somewhere.
I get that, Chimweka, but I just want to hear. I want to hear the voice of reason. Then, like, let's rationalize it and make me understand why it actually is an issue. Let's put the politics aside and let me hear why it is actually an issue, because I think that's the reason.
The only issue, John, is political. I don't think there's really.
Let's go to the reasoning of the president. Eh? So the president.
No, the reasoning of the president is clear.
Yeah, let's go there. Before we set the tone. The reason of the president is this, that there are other constituencies that are very vast, and so CDF is not sufficient.
Which is clear.
Which is very clear. Okay? Others have argued, and I'm part of the people that have argued, that if we see that other constituencies are very big and they've got a larger population, why then can't we increase CDF to those constituencies? If our biggest problem is CDF is given equally to constituencies which are small and constituencies which are big, why then don't we focus on allocating more resources to constituencies which are big?
But that's just one side of the argument. The other side of the argument is having one person administer over a huge constituency. That is one of the other challenges. That defeats the purpose or the idea of decentralizing. Having a vast constituency being overseen by one person is a problem in itself. So it should go beyond just the Constituency Development Fund. But let's go by that argument. What then becomes a scandal for the delimitation to happen next year? How does the election affect it?
So I was thinking Andrew would bring it up. What Andrew was explaining to me, because I had the same questions when we were having this discussion. But one point that he brought up, which is apparently an argument for those who do not support it, is that there might be there's some fear that there might be the ruling party will target constituencies where they have which they believe they have the strongholds. So this means you're duplicating members of parliament, and it's a deliberate initiative to increase the presence of ruling party members in the National Assembly. And you know what that means consequentially. Laws will easily be passed and supported and so on. So that's, I guess, the concern that apparently comes up.
So in that context then, it doesn't matter whether it's before an election or after an election, because ultimately an election will always come. It's always going to come after 5 years. So whether this happens now, a year before an election, or it happens a year after an election, it's still going to happen, and it's still come back to that.
Another big news story for today is that the Ministry of Health is investigating the death of a 9-year-old girl in Kanyama who exhibited symptoms of cholera before passing away. Minister of Health, Elijah Muchima, confirms that the girl was from a family of 2 individuals aged 54 and 32, both of whom tested positive for cholera. The 2 patients were treated at Kanyama Cholera Treatment Center and discharged on the 28th of February 2025. Mr. Muchima has explained that the family members recently attended the funeral of a man who had died at home under unclear circumstances but had displayed symptoms of consistent cholera. And we speak now to Professor Lloyd Mulenga, Director Infectious Diseases at the Ministry of Health, to just get a clear understanding on the cholera outbreak that has befallen our country. Doc, thank you so much Prof, thank you so much for making time to join us tonight on this edition of Diamond Live.
Thank you so much. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much, Professor Mulenga. Very worrying situation here, and I think that every time people hear cholera, they kind of get uneasy, and you would understand why. But I'd like to find out from you if there is a huge or an urgent need for people to worry in this latest discussion around cholera. Is this something that people should worry about?
Well, no, not to panic, but just to be careful and also to be vigilant on how we conduct ourselves, especially in public settings, and also how we maintain our hygiene practices as well. That is very, very key, but we don't need the country to panic, really. What has happened is because of the vaccination which has happened, especially in the hotspot areas in Lusaka, we have seen that the number of cases really has not been alarming compared to last year. Copper Belt, we are also seeing a downtrend in the number of cases. You've seen Muchinga as well. We have turned the corner in Nakonde. So really, it's not to worry. But when we have even a single case and a single death, it's something which concerns us. It means that our public health measures are not up to date.
Your estimation, if I'm hearing you right, should suggest that the likelihood of a spread is not very high.
It's not very high. It's not very high because most of the hotspots were vaccinated. Many people in those hotspots were vaccinated, and that has led to some form of immunity in the areas which we are concerned about. If you remember last year, at this time, we were really, really panicking. Remember, we had heroes, but this year, despite having floods and also despite having ceremonies like the Nchwala, we've tried to maintain really a number of cases under control. And we don't need to panic. We just need to keep up the hygienic measures. But also, we know the long-term measures to combating cholera are proper hygiene, proper sanitation, proper water supply. And we need to invest highly in those measures for us to even avoid a single case of cholera and any death from cholera.
That's absolutely true. That's what needs to be done. But we also acknowledge the fact that that's much more long-term in terms of investment. But one of the much more immediate solutions present has to be the vaccination. And I always ask myself why we tend to vaccinate around the time there's an outbreak. Chileshe, for example, was experiencing this outbreak, and they saw hundreds of thousands of vaccines going their way. Is it that we don't have enough vaccines and capacity to have a continuous vaccination exercise, unlike waiting for an outbreak and then administering these vaccines?
I think that the problem is twofold, really. Vaccination is not a solution to cholera. In fact, we should not even be talking about cholera. We need to invest highly in the issues which you've raised, the sanitation, the water supply. And we cannot vaccinate the whole country, especially for a disease like cholera, where you know that only a few areas are the ones which are going to be affected. And again, you cannot even predict which cases are going to be imported into which areas as well. So there is a vaccination which can happen for any disease as a part of a response because you have an outbreak. It happens for, when we've heard of cases of polio, that there may be a wild case reported of polio. We have gone in to vaccinate in those areas. And this should not be really for cholera something that should be recurring every year. But also when you look at the vaccines for cholera, globally, we are at a stage where we are short of supply for cholera vaccines. There are very few companies which want to invest into cholera vaccination because we know that there are very few countries that have cholera, a few countries in Asia, here in Africa, you may have a few countries in South America, and it does not make much economic sense to produce those cholera vaccines for these drug and also vaccine manufacturers. So we have a shortage of these vaccines, but also when we look at cholera, it's something which we can control without vaccines. And even when you give the vaccines, it's a short-term solution. Immunity wanes over time. Within 2 years, again, you need to give the vaccinations. Our goal should be to invest highly in the measures, the wash measures, which are key to control cholera and other diarrheal diseases, but also hygienic measures at personal and also community levels.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Lloyd Mulenga, for talking to us on this edition of Diamond Live. And he has clearly put it at the end there, talking about how individuals and families need to take care of themselves and enhance the WASH measures. You're watching tonight's edition of Diamond Live. We'll take a break. When we come back, Heartson Mabeta is Member of Parliament in Mufulira. He'll be joining us to talk about a very interesting topic that we scratched on as we were talking, but he'll be delving into detail, sharing his thoughts on delimitation to a fair administration of the Constituency Development Fund. Stay with us.
Wanna free bets? Follow these steps. Join 1xBet app. Confirm your participation. Bet on the correct match score. Get a free bet every week. 1x free bet. Active bonuses for active players.
Son, well, I'm sure life seems hard for you right now. When you read these words, it means that you're at the age me and your mother were when we moved to Lusaka. I remember how many times your mom and I were enjoying. We always found time to comfort each other after a long day. For us, home was about supporting each other. All this to tell you and your wife, it's gonna be fine.
Small moments of happiness still have a lot of meaning when they remind us of where we come from. Boom. Never forget home.
Pascal's showing his boss the efficient new technology they've installed. She is pleased, but now she's asking, why is that still there? Pascal explains that the wells can store many, many messages. The boss is not so pleased anymore. If you haven't upgraded your contact center yet, it's time to get business done better with MTN Business.
Today,
start big
with Victory
Cornflakes.
Victory Cornflakes.
The end of your journey will be big. Stay on your feet, chase to achieve. Give it your all and just believe that it's gonna be big when you start big. Victory Cornflakes. Start big today. Victory Cornflakes. Remember to always keep it, do it in whatever you do. Do it, keep it in whatever you do.
Today, the best maize grain Zambia has to offer are perfectly toasted into golden flakes that pack a big crunch. Today, start big with Big Tree Cornflakes.
So how can you get clean and affordable energy? How can you avoid plastic in your daily life? What kind of jobs are there for you in a green economy? Echo Africa shows you people and ideas that improves our lives and the world we live in. Get inspired. Echo Africa.
There's an old saying that an idle mind is a devil's workshop. No bomb guys who you. I don't mind there is sometimes change too. And so, to improve himself, he decided to learn a little Kung Fu. Oh, but he soon realized that to be the best, one had to endure the worst. Alali trainer. No kutrena. No kutrena. Until one day.
You are ready.
And so began the legend of Kung Fu Banda.
Kung Fu Energy. Master the power. Now in a new look with Baba Mubuyu plus Moringa flavor.
What a bad day when everything is bright and golden. Bad day. The sun is shining in the mighty morning. Bad day. Without my family in that moment, that day would have been a bad day.
Yeah, everyone's bad day is my bad day. But guess what? When my banja comes together, there are no bad days.
When you are there, you bring the shine.
Banja washing powder, the family detergent.
Nafuchi! Bet Lions February Mabwana mega giveaway is here! Win electrifying prizes again! And another lucky winner will take home an incredible life-changing 500,000 kwacha! 500 Every 5 kwacha bet on sport, aviator, and casino games ends you an entry into the Mabwana giveaway. Hello, head to betlion.co.zm now and join the Mabwana Mega Giveaway.
All in my head. Fruticana zona.
Fruticana. Feel the rhythm, taste the fun.
Well, thanks so much for still staying with us. Now, President Hakainde Hichilema has called for the delimitation of vast constituencies to improve the distribution of Constituency Development Fund and enhance service delivery. President HH noted that some constituencies are so large that members of parliament struggle to fully engage with their communities and address their needs effectively. He made these remarks during his national address to Parliament on the application of national values and principles. Furthermore, the President did urge MPs to support constitutional amendments to facilitate the delimitation of these vast constituencies. It's for this reason that we summoned Kankoyo Member of Parliament, Honorable Heartson Mabeta, to get his thoughts and his views over this call that was made by the President. Honorable, good evening. Thank you so much for making time to be with us tonight.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Andrew and team. It's a great time to be here. We usually come at a time when there's always some form of debate. But at the end of the discussion, I'm sure we tend to agree somewhere.
Yeah.
So if you sign up for debating so often.
Yeah. I think we always find a common ground, and that's what we focus on. What's good for all of us. At the end of the day, we are all Zambians, young people. We still want to have an ambitious and energetic life. So we want what is good for the next generation.
The call by the President was very clear that you ought to support this call by him for vast constituencies to be delimited. What is your position over this call by the President?
Well, I think here we're not reinventing the wheel. We need to look back to where we're coming from. 2005, 2006, the Kenyan delegation sent some MPs to come and learn about the CDF, which was already on the paper. There was a paper which was here. But as Zambians, we're always good at putting something in writing and we show it. They came and read through, checked, looked at what was in that document. They got the document, went and implemented it into Kenya. They started doing exactly what was in that document, all the recommendations. And when you go to Kenya today, you'll be shocked to say Kenya is one of the leading examples of the effective implementation of CDF and how it has transformed that country's GDP. Within the 20 years, they've been able to double the GDP from 55 billion to something close to 100 billion because of taking resources where it matters the most. Just 2022, I was privileged to be among the members of parliament who went to see how Kenya implemented what they learned from here. You can see how bad Zambians can be. Someone will prepare a document to put in mind, someone copies your document, they go and implement, and you go and learn how they're implementing what you generated. So when you look at what has been done in Kenya, how that country has transformed this economically and being able to diversify the economy and become resistant to any economic shock, you'll be surprised to see that Kenyans have been able to grow their economy. Their population is happy. When you look at the Nairobi, Kenya's population is close to 60 million. But there are only 5 million people in Nairobi. Here in Zambia, I've got 20 million. Okay, just close to 20 million, but you have 3 million. 15% of Zambia's population is in Lusaka, but in Kenya it's only about 7%. Why? Because everybody are happy. There is very little this urbanization. Very little people want to go to Nairobi to stay in the city where there is everything. So all that tells you to say, there's something we're not doing right as Zambians. We're just too much into politics. At the end of the day, it's the population who suffers the most. So, going back to Kenya again, one thing Kenya did, we increased the CDF to $1 million per year, consistently for the past 20 years. And they also realized to say they had to increase the number of constituencies from below 110 to 290 constituencies to date. They expanded the number of constituencies so that each section of society could feel they're close to the government. So this suggestion by the president is not something new. It's not something strange. It's something backed by empirical evidence. Science has indicated that whatever we're doing here in Zambia is what Kenya started doing 20 years ago when they came and got our document.
So you've given us an example of Kenya. You're right to say that we're not reinventing the wheel. This has been a call by even different governments, even right here in Zambia. Even the Patriotic Front had called for delimitation. But the problem has been that we've not found common ground. We've not had consensus on whether this process must go ahead. Why do you think we've not had consensus over delimitation for so many years?
Well, I think maybe it's the things we're doing now, which we didn't do that time, because had we started this process of delimitation, the process of increasing resources going to the community like Kenya did 20 years ago, wouldn't be where we are today. So just going through the teething stage which our friends in Kenya went through. Immediately they increased the CDF to a minimum of $1 million per constituency per year. They started now looking at how effective can they get to. So what we are doing today in Zambia is we're just doing what we should have done 20 years ago. We're 20 years behind Andrew, and I don't think there's any person who would want to be delayed or who would want to stop the process which is delivering and bringing value to a common person. So for me, I think maybe if I was to be asked, like on my personal level, what method can we use to delimitate a constituency?
But before you can give us your method, what do you think has been the main challenges in new members of parliament reaching a consensus over delimitation?
Well, I think I've been interacted with a lot of members of parliament. There is no MP who's genuinely would come here and oppose. If they're not taking any political party, that's not holding a political line, who would want to oppose the delimitation, because the increase of the CDF has put more pressure on the MP to ensure that things are done. Remember, as we were sitting today, members of parliament are not part of the council. The only thing we do as MPs is first to prioritize the projects. Every year we get submissions from the communities through the CDF committee. Then we are told to prioritize. Why? Because most of the projects, like in this year in Kankoyo 2025, despite the CDF we've had in the last 3 years, we had projects, a request of projects worth 77 million. But the amount available for projects was 17 million. So we had to reduce that request from 77 million to 17. We had to take away 60 million. So that's why now the MP has to make intelligence decision on which project to do, prioritize which one should come first, which one has to wait.
But just on that, you've mentioned that any well-meaning member of parliament will support this unless they look at it from a political lens. From your interactions, what's the political argument of those who do not agree with this proposal, and how valid could the arguments be?
Well, the argument basically is on the unknown fears of maybe the ruling party, the government in power, would use this delimitation as a method of allocating more constituencies in areas where they are perceived stronghold, and that give the two-third majority, an automatic two-third majority to the ruling party for them to be able to pass any bills which would need a constitutional bill which would need two-thirds. That's the fear. That's the only challenge. The fear.
You don't think that's a genuine fear?
Well, in terms of
you as UPND had the same fear when the PF was pushing for delimitation.
Well, yeah. So that's why for me, I think the fear, and maybe the method would use, is to look at having a maximum number of wards per constituencies. Because there are constituencies like Kankoyo, there are only 9 wards. I know of Kavushi, which has 4 wards. I know of Kanyama, Kampisa, 5 or 6 wards. But there are constituencies with 24 wards. Now imagine a member of parliament who's sitting on 24 wards with a radius of a minimum radius of 200 kilometers just one way. Before you are given, you only have Fridays, 12 hours. That's when 13. That's when you end parliament. You have to.
It's an issue of time. Do you think that it's the issue of time, because people now are claiming that the president is making these suggestions as we're nearing an election? Does it matter?
No. It's not an issue of time, but it's an issue of being effective, being able as a vision carrier. Remember, a member of parliament is a person who goes in all the words to get the aspiration and dreams of the people and want to translate them with the available resources. So if I'm given a submission of projects which are worth 77 million, but there's only 17 million available, I have to go and convince the community why I have to do with the 60 million this year, and maybe give them the roadmap on how they're going to implement all those projects. So we need time to go and engage the communities.
And this point you've raised, and we interact with different members of parliament, and we hear different concerns from some of them. We've interviewed members of parliament from constituencies in rural areas, members of parliament from constituencies in urban areas. We can categorize yourself under the urban area constituencies. There's been a concern that with CDF, in as much as it's over 36 million kwacha, when it's implemented in rural areas, and we've seen a lot of members of parliament who have projects running and so on in rural areas get a lot of applause and good work done. But for you, members of parliament in the urban areas, the concern is that the needs cost way more than what is allocated. And you're given a clear case example here of the 77 million versus the 17 million allocation. How does this also work for you as members of parliament, even with a constituency where you have just a few wards, but you're still facing these challenges?
Well, I think it's the impact on the need-based assessment. If you come to Kanyama and you build a maternity wing where there is already the Kanyama level 1, people are already able to access a better health facility than what you are giving them. The light on the ocean won't be so much. But if you go to Kanchivia, where a good friend, Sunday Chanda, comes from, where there was completely nothing, because of the vast of the constituents, pregnant mothers used to move over 200 kilometers to have access to the next health facility and to take them close to it. The impact is going to be huge in that community. So the urban areas, most of the facilities are there, but that's due to this urbanization, I highlighted earlier on, there's so much pressure on the limited available facilities. So if you put you put a 1x3 classroom in the Kabwata, it won't have so much impact as it's going to have in Shangombo, where kids walk over 15 kilometers. So the impact of the projects also matters to the need of the community,
And just on that, I mean, how much of an impact would you say decentralization has had for constituencies such as yourself? Because again, there are certain members of parliament who have called for this to go back to the central government line ministries should be the ones spearheading some of these projects. For example, if you're talking about, working on a health facility, it should be the Ministry of Health deliberately facilitating that so that we see proper implementation, as opposed to the current situation where it's the councils who are administering these funds. What are your thoughts around that?
The fact that now we have got communities being able to also participate, also demand, also able to come with cost estimates of these projects. These projects are highlighting the engineers, they are, the young people like us who have gone to school, they have been paid by the government, and they come back to say, I want to contribute, I want to design a bridge here. They are professionals, engineers, and they're participating. Decentralization has brought government close to the people. Everybody wants to feel they're part of whatever, if development is going into their areas. So decentralization has just brought the government very close to the people, and there's so much connection between the government and the community. That's why even see now today that if you have to compare the way ZDRA has just increased the taxes they're collecting, there are so many Zambians willing to pay tax now because they feel there's value for the tax they're paying.
In principle, Honorable, if we say that the reason for why we need to delimitate these constituencies is because we need a fair allocation of CDF. And I was arguing with my colleagues here that perhaps why don't we look at things in a different way? If we agree that Kankoyo is very big, why then can't we allocate more resources to Kankoyo than we allocate resources to Kabushi with 4 wards? Why don't we follow that principle that we allocate more resources to constituencies that are big and have got a much more bigger population?
Well, it's a matter of effective in the delivery of the service. What we're advocating for has got scientific backing. Kenya, and like I gave an example, it's not about sentimentation, it's not about how we feel, it's not about what we desire, it's about proven record with empirical evidence. What has worked in Kenya? We want to grow our economy faster than maybe Kenya. Look at Kenya's natural resources. Much of the land is mostly hilly, is mountains. They don't have big mines like we do have. But through the proper management of resources, their GDP, the economy is far better than what we are here today. So we need to find and close the gap. What are we not doing right? There's so many times we keep on questioning. Zambia is rich, but the people are poor. What haven't we done right? And these are some of the things we're trying to fix.
Do you think,
and these are things which are going to live beyond even any political party.
Do you think your administration, our government, rushed into implementation of CDF? What I mean is the increase in CDF, because we seem to still have a lot of bottlenecks around CDF, to an extent that even civil society organizations are calling for government to reduce the allocation of CDF because it's not a game changer like you are trying to paint it, Honorable Mabeta. TIZ said...
And gets to be underutilized.
It gets to be underutilized and really the impact is not felt like you try to portray it. Do you think perhaps government rushed into running with this project?
I don't understand the measures. Maybe they've got their own way of measuring the impact of a certain program. But I can attest to you to say when you come to Kankoyo, you come to Mofrida, where the 3 members of us, the 3 MPs, have managed to put our political differences aside. Me, I'm your PND, Honorable Mumba is PF, Honorable Mwira the PF. We put our political affiliation aside and we decided to work together as a team. I'm sure you can be shocked if you are to come and review the impact of the CDF in our communities, more especially to those areas where they were lacking. Most of the communities, if you were to go through the projects you've done and how they're impacting positively the number of the people in our communities, it will take me maybe 3 hours. But what I can tell you is, from our assessment, more especially that we made that wise decision, we didn't have to duplicate. We didn't have to buy graders for each constituency. We put money together and bought 1 grader. We didn't have to repeat buying a bulldozer. We put money together and bought a bulldozer for all the 3 constituencies, despite our political differences. So we are clever. We had to put politics aside and moved as a team, and the impact is seen. I can tell you, Andrew, today, we are one of the few constituencies, if you go to Notek, who have managed to send brilliant youths who didn't have anybody to take them to such a school like Notek to upgrade their skill levels. We have over 80 students who are going to that school every year. We are also subsidizing them not only with the tuition fees, we are giving them accommodation allowance, also giving them meal allowance. From CDF, brilliant students, we didn't want them to stay at home.
But you're giving these students that you're supporting with skills, you're giving them accommodation allowance and
meal allowance. They're 1,000 kwacha per month for the months they stay at school, so that they can just focus on the education requirement. And from the time we pushed in, from the time we started sponsoring, among the top performing students at Notec, they're those who are coming from my constituency. My constituency was known as a constituency for Jerabos, abandoned youths who didn't have any direction in future. But we didn't know that among the Jerabos, we had very brilliant young men.
What about the stories that we hear, Honourable, that there are councils that are sabotaging, the effective implementation of CDF, and that's the reason for why people can feel the impact, of CDF. How have your councils managed to unlock this obstacle?
Well, I think that's now where the second point where the president is advocating for MPs to go back to the council. Like I said, our role ends at prioritizing the projects and also just ensuring that providing an oversight. But by MPs going back to the council, MPs will be able now to sit in the council meetings and make follow-ups and ensure that they are part of the monitoring of the progress being made.
What is the reason for why the MPs were removed from the council and decision-making wholly?
I don't really understand, because the same that decision was made in 2016. I wasn't part of the decision which was made. I don't have an idea, but I also keep on wondering to say, why were MPs removed from the council? Because as a policy implementer, you need to be part of the progress and both the success and the failure of what you are doing. But today, MPs get blamed for slow movement and utilization of the CDF. We're not part of the implementing team.
But so what does that say about what the president was saying? Because the president was saying there's some members of parliament who are seemingly frustrating these efforts, and even hinted towards sanctions for what he was calling economic sabotage. So then what could the president have been referring to there?
Did he lack knowledge on some of these processes?
No. It's on the process of prioritizing, because if you haven't sat as a CDF committee, like most of the constituencies, including Kankoyo, we had our prioritizing meeting on the first week of January. But there's some still constituencies where they haven't met, because the MP has been always calling for adjournment, is busy at parliament, with a committee meeting. So that's become the first stage of sabotaging a good program. Because if you don't prioritize, there's a 77 million request, but you need to reduce it to 17 million. So that's why the need of the MP has to come in to convince which will be prioritized.
So meaning the MP still has influence in
yes,
yes,
but not on the implementation, but on the process of selection.
At first, this looks like a simple matter, Honourable Mabeta. You are in the ruling party, you are in the ruling government. What is so difficult with few MPs getting back to councils? What has been the biggest issue when you've got the numbers to be able to influence policy?
It's a constitutional matter. It was embedded in the constitution, just like the delimitation is a constitutional matter. It has to be dealt through changing the constitution.
So you don't believe that other members of parliament can support this call for members of parliament to be back in the council?
Everybody is supporting him because there's need. As members of parliament,
don't you push an emotion there?
No, don't change the constitution through emotion. You have to change the constitution. There's an article in the constitution which needs certain processes to change, and this is one of them is the awareness which we are doing today. The president giving some direction on where he thinks things are not being done right. So when the president comes with such a sentiment, for me as a representative of the people, I have to take it, because at the end of the day, I need to ensure that, and remember, decentralization is not just about the CDF. There's a lot of resources which is coming to the council beyond the CDF. CDF is just one component of resource. There's a lot of resource in health, there's resource in education, there's so much coming to the council, but members of parliament are not part of the process to ensure that our people in our constituents can participate and get an equal share. So, now if you were to ask me to say, what method can we use from my own perspective, is to go through the number of words. I don't think it's fair for Chilabombe to have 24 words, When you look at the vast area of the constituents with 24 words and want to compare it to Kankoyo with 9 words, you're going to see that the impact of the resource coming in the constituents are going to be seen move faster in Kankoyo other than Chilawambo, where there are 24 words. So if you are going to say, okay, let's put a limit, let's put a maximum. Immediately a constituency has more than 10 words. it requires to go to the next constituency. So any constituencies whether it's in Mwinirunga, where it's in Porokoso, where it's Kanchivia, where it is in, if it is in Chipata Central, as long as there are more than 10 wards, those constituencies should be split into 2, so that there is the fairness and the equity delivery of resources. If you are going to follow population, the reason some other constituencies are more populated than the others because there's concentrated, there's saturation. The constituencies in Lusaka, they've got high population because everybody wants to come to Lusaka. But if you are going to develop Shangombo, you are going to develop Kanchivia, there will be very little movement of people coming from Shangombo to Lusaka because the same service they're chasing in Lusaka will be found where they're coming from. In fact, even this, our forefather, may he rest in peace, President Kenneth Kaunda, they go back to the land, go back to the land sentiment. People will naturally go back where there's production, they're going to have a better life.
The president didn't hint on population, but he hinted on vastness of a constituency. Do you think also population should be a key factor as we delimitate? Because if we say that, according to your explanation, that if a constituency has more than 9 wards,
more than 10,
then we cut it from there. We count, from there. What if other wards, have got very minimal population? How do we deal with that? But also, I want to get your general thought on the population size. Let's forget the vastness. Let's talk about population. Do you think that that's a very important factor as well?
Because from the president's suggestion, he says this could happen on either population or geographical reasons, just to add on to his question. So how does that also tie in with your proposal of wards when the president spoke about population and geographical grounds?
Well, from my perspective, if you're going to put all the infrastructures which are making Kanyama more popular than Mandevu, having a huge population in Lusaka, and making maybe Shangombo less populated, and we put the same facilities in Shangombo, you're going to see people moving from Mandevu and Kanyama, those who come from those areas, to go back where they are going to be comfortable. Of this, every year dealing with issues of cholera, issues of this, because there's so much concentration in one area, and that has brought population closer. So the only way we can spread our population, we can deal with these historical issues of having too many shanty compounds around Lusaka, because that's where everything seems to be in Lusaka. It's to take the same service somewhere else, where there's low population, in fact. And those areas are going to become very productive. You're not going to spend 1 million kwacha to buy a 30 by 24 plots. If you take 1 million kwacha to Shangombo, you're a rich man. Because they're going to have all the facilities, they're going to have land which is virgin land. You're going to do your farming, you're going to do a lot of production of raw materials, which may support even the factories in the already populated areas. So we need to tame down the tables around. It's a very difficult decision, but I think it's the right way to do it.
I'm just thinking also, right here where we're seated, don't you think the implication is too much also when it comes to resources that have to be allocated towards this process? Number one, when we have new constituencies, we now need to have new, for example, new town councils. You obviously have new mayors in those particular respective constituencies to ensure that they sit to allocate resources. Don't you think this is a much more complicated process that and requires a lot of resources?
We already have 116 districts. They are enough to accommodate the extra number of constituencies. Remember, a constituency belongs in a district. So we don't need to add more districts where there are constituencies, because the constituency will belong to a district. But what this is going to do is the expansion of our country. Our country is going to be developed at a faster rate. Each ward, each constituency is going to be adding a certain value to the national GDP. When you look at Zambia's GDP, it's just centralized around Lusaka and the Copper Belt. Most of the districts, they contribute very minimal to our GDP. So if you want to get it right, and we want to reduce poverty through the growth of GDP, each ward, each constituency need to contribute something to the total GDP, and that's when we're going to have an impact. Zambia's GDP could double It's being doubled mainly because it's coming from maybe a boost in copper mining. We produce 3 million metric tons of copper in the next 10 years.
But just on,
so how is that going to reduce poverty to somebody in Shangongo?
I just want to find out, because obviously like your constituency is in Mufliwa, you have the central council that you all have to operate with. But I'm trying to think what this would also be like for members of parliament in those existing constituencies if they had to be delimitated. For example, if Kankoyo had to be split into Kankoyo North and South, and if you're a member of parliament right now and you have to make a decision on where you're going to stand, what gets to happen?
Well, I think for me, the people of Kankoyo, they've been my darling. You know, there's so much love and the communication between them. They always have a say. They would tell me which one will be the good for both of us. It's not about me. It's what works between me and the people who I'm so much in love with. I love the people of Kankoyo dearly. They're so close to my heart. And I can never make a decision without consulting them.
I know you still want to touch on delimitation, Andrew? Because I wanted to move to the next. I wanted to ask if you were among the members of parliament who walked out of the House during the debate of the high cost of living. I mean, we're talking about CDF, but I think that the issues around the economy stand out very, very, very critical in this time. Were you amongst the MPs that walked out?
Well, at that time, once I was in my constituency, I had a scheduled meeting with Mopani. We wanted to look at one of the very hot issue in Mufira, which has been the famous Black Mountain. So I scheduled a meeting to meet with the Mopani CEO, which unfortunately that meeting turned out to be sour. I'm sure you saw in the news. It was it's never happened, and it brought a lot of conflict between the community and the mining.
Perhaps I'll let Andrew touch on that. But would you have walked out? Because I think that your colleagues were accusing members of the ruling party to be running away from such an important debate in the House. The cost of living for many people felt that this was an opportunity for you in the ruling party to explain to the people of Zambia of how you would improve the lives of the people.
Especially the executive, who part of the people walked out.
Well, I think I haven't really gone back to check at what the reasons why that there was a decision to walk away, whether there was really a walk away, and I haven't really looked at those issues. Back to that. But when it comes to the cost of living, I think as a person who represents a community, it's something we need to accept that the cost of living has been very high. And we need to tell the people the major driver to the cost of living. What really drives our cost of living in Zambia, and what are we doing to address it? Zambia, we import most of 98%, most of the things we have here. Maybe even the plastic, which is this what I bought.
So you'd have actually stayed to debate.
Had I been that meeting and I was given a chance to give the other side of the story, or to tell the Zambians the truth about what drives the cost of living and the efforts being done to address the cost of living in the short term, long term, and in the present, I was going to speak because of the information.
We were going to stay.
I was going to debate.
So you condemn what?
You condemn your colleagues.
I don't know the reason which could.
But what is the possibility that?
Tell the reasons. We can tell the reasons.
But before we get to telling the reasons, we don't know how true that is. That Mr. Mabeta does not know the reasons, because I mean, all those members of parliament walking. Are you telling us you've not interacted with a single one of them to find out why?
No.
You've not listened to the news and found and heard why? Are you being honest that you have no reason why they did that?
I just came from the constituents. Then I was booked on to a workshop in Siavonga. So from the constituents, I only stayed a day in Lusaka, and I was in Siavonga, only came back today. So I haven't really had time to engage.
It's been about 2 weeks since that happened, and you've not cared, you've not bothered at all to find out why.
You don't need to be in Lusaka to know this information.
I was so much drawn into this Mopani issue. I think that's very important to the people of Kankoyo.
And so is the cost of living to the people of Zambia.
And that's why we wanted to have an engagement in Mopani, so that we can see how Mopani can support in addressing one of the short-term measures of addressing the cost of living is to increase the income levels of the population. When I've got a better spending purchasing power, we so much because we talk so much about the cost of living because our purchasing power is very, very weak. But with the measures which are being put in the mine and what is coming up, the income which those who are already employed are going to have, they'll be able to afford more of the same product, since the cost of living is addressed in the short term.
Do you think it's a disappointing? Well, according to some, says this is the first time in the history of this country that ruling party members of parliament walked out of the house, especially when a very important motion was supposed to be debated. Do you think it's disappointing, according to your conscience, as Kankoyo member of parliament?
Ask me that question again. I think I haven't gotten you correctly.
Do you think it's disappointing that ruling party members of parliament walked out, inclusive of ministers? Do you think it's disappointing?
It was a missed opportunity.
No.
Do you think it's disappointing?
It's not disappointing, as long as there's a reason for doing it. But if I was in that session, and I was given an opportunity to debate, I was going to decide on my
So these are the reasons. Maybe we can break it down for you, and then maybe you can make a judgment. And that's the thing. We've heard different statements. We've heard from the chief government spokesperson. We heard from the chief government whip. But from the chief government whip, he says the time was not sufficient because it was a motion on adjournment, and there's only about 45 minutes allocated or so, which he felt was not sufficient to explain. According to the chief government spokesperson, he says, well, they were not exactly mandated as the executive to respond because there's a motion on adjournment, so it was just pretty much a venting session. So it wasn't really something that required the executive to respond, to give a ministerial statement. So those have been the reasons given in a nutshell.
Well, all I can say is it's a learning phase. Yeah, I'm sure a lesson was learned from whatever happened that time. So we are still learning, and we continue learning until we get it right. Learning is a continuous process.
Do Zambians deserve an apology for that, do you think?
No, they don't. There's no need for apology. It's a debate. So there's a lot of other forums where we can engage the Zambia, not only through parliament, no.
Kankoyo member of parliament, Andrew Heartson Mabeta, always a pleasure to speak with you and break down the issues that this country is facing. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you too. It's always a pleasure. I hope to get an invitation anytime soon.
Kankoyo lawmaker Heartson Mabeta was joining us on tonight's edition of Diamond Live. But also earlier on, we were privileged to be joined in by Professor Lloyd Mulenga, who is Director, Infectious Diseases at the Ministry of Health. We're speaking of things cholera. On behalf of the entire production crew, thank you so much for watching. See you again on Friday for another exclusive edition of Diamond Live. Good night for now.
Thank you.